A girl sleeps beside a washing machine for years, but yet when the judge reads her birth certificate, the people controlling her suddenly panic. That only means the real story was hidden long before court.
Don't let her sit with us, Selphira said, without even looking at me. The floor is where she sleeps, so the floor is where she stays. I lowered my eyes and stood beside the courtroom wall, clutching the sleeves of my oversized sweater while people stared like this was completely normal. Corvin Vane sat confidently beside his attorney, polished shoes crossed neatly, already talking about me like I was some dangerous problem they'd tried to manage for years. The hearing was supposed to decide whether I'd be sent away to a behavioral facility after a teacher reported the bruises on my knees and the fact I slept beside a washing machine at home. Nobody asked why. Then the judge reached for my birth certificate. At first, he looked bored. Routine. Another file. Another unwanted kid. But the second his eyes landed on my last name, his expression changed completely. And suddenly, Corvin stopped smiling. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The room went quiet in a way that didn't feel normal. Judge Halbrecht adjusted his glasses and looked back down at the paper a second time, slower now. Across the courtroom, Selphira's fingers tightened around her purse so hard the leather creaked. She noticed it too. Corvin leaned forward first. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "our daughter has a history of manipulation. I'd appreciate it if we stayed focused on the behavioral concerns." Our daughter. That was new. Usually they called me the girl whenever anyone else was around. The judge ignored him. "How long has Tartiana been in your custody?" 9 years, Selphira answered quickly. But Corvin said, "Almost 10. They both stopped talking after that. I stayed where I was near the wall. Nobody had told me to sit down anyway. The social worker who brought me there kept glancing between the Vanes and the judge like she was trying to understand why the atmosphere had suddenly changed. Before today, nobody had ever questioned anything about my life. Not when I slept on the laundry room floor beside the dryer, not when Selphira made me eat after everyone else finished. Not even when guests came over and laughed because I had a blanket instead of a bedroom. Corvin always explained everything calmly. He was good at that. He wore expensive suits, donated money to local charities, remembered judges' names, shook hands firmly. People listened when he spoke, and people usually believed him. "Our sons are afraid of her," he continued. "We've done everything we can, but Tartiana becomes unstable when she doesn't get attention." I almost looked up at that. Almost. Because the strange thing was, Corvin never let me attract attention at home. He hated it whenever anyone asked questions about me. The judge tapped the birth certificate lightly against the desk. "This document was amended 6 years ago." Neither of them answered. A court clerk entered quietly and handed Judge Halbrecht a note. He read it once, then slowly looked directly at me for the first time since the hearing started. Not at the Vanes, at me. And when he spoke again, his voice sounded completely different. "Miss Vane," he said carefully, "have you ever been told the name Delacroix before?" Corvin shot to his feet so fast his chair slammed backward onto the floor. The courtroom had been quiet all morning until the judge said that name. Delacroix. The second it left his mouth, Corvin's entire expression changed. Not anger, not confusion. Fear. His attorney immediately stood. "Your Honor, I fail to see the relevance of—" "I didn't ask you. Judge Halbrecht interrupted. Corvin slowly lowered himself back into his chair, but the confidence he walked in with was gone. Selphira wouldn't even look at me anymore. She kept staring at the table like she already knew something was slipping out of her control. I did know the name. Not clearly, not enough to understand it, but hearing it out loud made something tighten in my chest. When I was little, before the veins took me in, I remembered flashes of things that never matched the life they described to me. A huge hotel lobby with marble floors, a woman laughing while speaking French into a phone, a gold necklace with a strange crest stamped into the metal.
Every time I mentioned those memories growing up, Selphira punished me for making stories up. Eventually, I stopped talking about them. Judge Halbrecht flipped through the file again. You stated this child entered your care through emergency foster placement after surviving relatives declined custody. That's correct, Corbin answered quickly. The judge nodded once. Then why are there no foster records attached to her case? For the first time since arriving, nobody answered immediately. The silence stretched long enough for people in the gallery to start shifting in their seats. Corvin cleared his throat. Those records may have been archived improperly. By every agency in the state? The judge asked. Selphira suddenly spoke up. Tartiana has emotional issues. She becomes attached to fantasies. That's the real concern here. I looked down at my hands again, but not before noticing the judge writing something on a separate yellow pad that hadn't been there earlier. Not behavioral notes. Names. Dates. Questions. Then the courtroom doors opened again, and a clerk hurried toward the bench with another folder clutched tightly against her chest. She whispered something into the judge's ear. His expression hardened instantly. Then he looked directly at me and asked, "Who told you to keep asking about your birth certificate?" I swallowed carefully. "No one," I said. I remembered the name myself. Even the judge looked unsettled. That single sentence changed the entire courtroom. Nobody spoke for several seconds after I answered. Judge Halbrecht leaned back slowly, studying me in complete silence now, like he was trying to fit two different stories together. Across the room, Corvin suddenly stood again. "We need a recess," he said sharply. "Immediately." His attorney nodded fast. "My clients were not informed this hearing would drift into unrelated allegations." "Sit down," the judge replied. Corvin didn't move right away. That was the first moment I realized something important. People like Corvin were used to controlling rooms, used to speaking and having everyone else adjust around them. But the judge wasn't adjusting. Selphira reached for Corvin's sleeve quietly, almost warning him. He sat back down, jaw tight. Judge Halbrecht turned another page in the file. Miss Tartiana Vane has no official foster placement number, no intake records, no agency transfer documents, and according to this amendment, he paused. Her original birth registration was altered 6 years ago. The courtroom shifted again. Even the social worker looked confused now. Corvin forced out a short laugh. Clerical errors happen all the time. Not on sealed identity records.
If every foster record is missing, why does he immediately call it a clerical error instead of asking what happened to them?
The judge replied. A bailiff approached the bench and handed over another document. Judge Halbrecht read it silently, then looked toward Corvin with a completely different expression. Not skepticism anymore. Recognition. Meanwhile, whispers had already started spreading through the gallery behind us. Did he say Delacroix? The Delacroix estate? I didn't understand why that name mattered so much, but Corvin clearly did. Sweat had started forming near his collar, despite the cold courtroom. Then the judge asked a question that changed the atmosphere again. Mr. Vane, why were inheritance notifications redirected to your business office? Selphira's head snapped toward Corvin. Too fast. Like she hadn't expected that question either. During the recess that followed, Selphira cornered me near the hallway vending machines while deputies spoke quietly with the judge inside the courtroom. For the first time in my life, she looked nervous around me. You don't understand what's happening, she whispered. Some truths ruin people. I stared at her without answering. Then she leaned closer. You have no idea what people will do for money. Before I could respond, the courtroom doors opened again. Judge Halbrecht returned to the bench, his face completely unreadable. Then he said the words that made the entire room freeze. This hearing is now part of an active criminal investigation. And Corvin suddenly shouted, She was never supposed to find out. The second Corvin yelled that, two deputies moved toward him immediately. Sir, sit down now. The entire courtroom erupted into overlapping voices. Reporters waiting outside the family court doors started pushing inward after hearing shouting, and Selphira looked like she might faint. But Judge Halbrecht never raised his voice. Clear the gallery, he ordered calmly. No one leaves this building without authorization. That silence afterward felt heavier than the shouting.
Corvin sat rigidly in his chair while investigators began speaking quietly with court staff near the bench. His attorney had stopped defending him completely. In fact, the man wouldn't even sit beside him anymore. And for the first time in years, Corvin couldn't control what happened next. Within an hour, investigators returned with preliminary records pulled from state archives and financial databases. The inconsistencies started stacking up fast. My school enrollment forms had conflicting guardian signatures. Medical records listed different dates for the same custody transfer, and the foster placement number attached to my file belonged to a child from another county entirely. Selphira kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but every answer she gave created another contradiction. Then investigators found the trust accounts. That was the moment the room changed again. A financial crimes investigator placed several folders onto the evidence table. Payments connected to the Delacroix family estate have been redirected for approximately 9 years. Judge Halbrecht looked at Corvin. Redirected to companies under your control. Nobody denied it. I sat perfectly still while pieces of my childhood started rearranging themselves in my head. The expensive hotels I remembered, the necklace with the gold crest, the feeling that something about my life had never matched the way the Vanes described it. Then an older investigator entered, carrying a single photograph inside a clear evidence sleeve. He placed it carefully on the table. Judge Halbrecht studied it first. Then he slowly turned it toward the courtroom. It showed a little girl standing between a man and woman dressed for a charity gala. The woman's hand rested gently on the child's shoulder. The child was me, and printed beneath the image were the words, Lucien, Mireille, and Tartiana Delacroix. 3 days before the couple's reported deaths, Judge Halbrecht looked directly at Corvin. This child was never abandoned, he said quietly. Selphira started crying immediately, but Corvin never looked at the photograph even once. By the end of the day, the family court hearing barely mattered anymore. State investigators, financial crime officers, and 2 federal agents had taken over the courtroom entirely. What started as a hearing about an unstable foster child had turned into something much larger. Because the truth wasn't just that Corvin and Selphira abused me. It was that they had built their entire lives around stealing mine. Investigators uncovered the full timeline over the next several hours. Years earlier, Corvin Vane had worked as a financial advisor for Lucien and Mireille Delacroix, a wealthy couple known for luxury hotels and international real estate investments. When the Delacroix couple supposedly died in a boating accident overseas, their surviving daughter, me, became the beneficiary of a protected trust worth millions. But almost immediately after their deaths, custody records changed. Identity records were amended. Inheritance notifications were redirected, and somehow I disappeared. Not legally adopted, not formally placed into foster care, just hidden. Judge Halbrecht reviewed every document personally while investigators compared signatures and account transfers. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. The trust payments meant for my care had funded Corvin's businesses, their house, their vacations, their public image, even the charity foundations they used to make themselves look respectable. And the reason they treated me the way they did finally made horrifying sense. If I grew up confident, connected, or curious, I might start asking questions, so they made sure I felt worthless instead. Sleeping on the laundry room floor wasn't punishment, it was conditioning. Every insult, every humiliation, every reminder that I was less than had one purpose: keep me small enough not to fight back. But they made one mistake. They assumed I would never remember anything. Late that evening, investigators contacted surviving members of the Delacroix family. A woman named Celestine Delacroix arrived at the courthouse just before midnight. The second she saw me, she stopped walking. One hand covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "You have Morel's face," she whispered. I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever looked at me like that before. Not with kindness. Not like I belonged somewhere. She recognized the small scar near my eyebrow immediately, the same scar mentioned in old family medical records recovered that afternoon. That was enough for investigators. Corvin Vane was arrested before sunrise on charges including fraud, identity falsification, unlawful guardianship, financial embezzlement, and child abuse. Authorities also reopened the Delacroix boating deaths investigation after discovering inconsistencies in witness statements and insurance filings connected to the case. Selfira agreed to cooperate within 2 days. The media coverage destroyed the Vane family's reputation almost overnight. Videos from old parties surfaced online showing their sons mocking me while guests laughed in the background. Former employees came forward describing years of controlling behavior inside the household. And suddenly, the people who once acted untouchable spent their time avoiding cameras and court reporters. A week later, I was taken to the Delacroix estate for the first time since childhood. I barely remembered it until I walked inside. Then small things started coming back all at once. The staircase, the paintings, the smell of the garden near the east windows. Celestine opened a bedroom door quietly and stepped aside. "This was yours," she said. For a moment, I just stood there, because in the center of the room was something so ordinary it almost didn't feel real anymore. A bed. Not a blanket beside a washing machine, not tile floor beside a dog bed, an actual bed waiting for me. I sat down carefully, running my hand across the blanket in silence while morning light came through the windows. And for the first time in years, nobody told me to get off the floor.
The uncertain part isn't the family hiding the truth for years. It's how everyone accepted the story until one document forced people to start questioning it.